God's plan for your work is far greater than you may realize. Many people see work as just a necessity, something they have to do to pay the bills and survive. But from the very beginning, work was never meant to be just about survival. It was part of God's design for humanity, a divine calling given to us so that we might reflect His glory and purpose in the world. When God created Adam, He placed him in the Garden of Eden and gave him work to do. Genesis 2:15 says, "The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it." Think about that for a moment. Before sin even entered the world, before there was toil, frustration, or exhaustion, God assigned work as something good, something purposeful. Work was part of the perfection of creation, a way for mankind to participate in God's ongoing plan for the world. But when sin entered, everything changed. Work became difficult. It became burdensome. People started to associate work with struggle rather than fulfillment. Many today wake up dreading the day ahead, feeling like they are stuck in a cycle of meaningless labor. They go through the motions, clocking in and out, never truly understanding why they are doing what they do. But God never intended for His people to live that way. The Bible teaches that God is deeply involved in every part of our lives, including our work. Proverbs 16:03 says, "Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and He will establish your plans." That means your work is not separate from your faith. It is not just something you do to get by. It is an opportunity to serve God, to reflect His goodness, and to bring Him glory. Whether you are building homes, driving buses, teaching children, or working in an office, every task can be an act of worship when done with the right heart. One of the biggest struggles people face is feeling like their work doesn't matter. They compare themselves to others who have more prestigious or higher paying jobs and feel insignificant. But God never measures the value of work by human standards. He sees faithfulness, diligence, and the heart behind what we do. When Jesus spoke of stewardship, He emphasized that it is not the size of the task that matters, but the faithfulness of the worker. In Luke 16:10, He said, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much." That means the smallest job, when done for the glory of God, holds immense value in His kingdom. Look at the life of Jesus. When He came to earth, He could have chosen to be born in a palace. He could have lived a life of comfort and prestige. But instead, He was born in a manger and grew up as a carpenter. Think about that. The Son of God, the King of Kings, spent years working with His hands, building things, laboring in a trade. His life was a testimony that no job is too small or insignificant when done with purpose. The truth is, no matter where you are working today, God has placed you there for a reason. Maybe you don't understand why you are in a certain position. Maybe you feel overlooked, unappreciated, or stuck. But God is always at work behind the scenes, preparing you for something greater. He uses every experience, every task, every struggle to shape you, to strengthen you, and to draw you closer to Him. Joseph in the Bible is a perfect example of this. He was sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. From the outside, it looked like his life was a series of setbacks. But in reality, God was preparing him for something greater. Every place Joseph worked, even as a slave, even in prison, he remained faithful. And because of that faithfulness, God elevated him to a position of great influence, making him second in command over all of Egypt. The same God who worked in Joseph's life is working in yours. You may not see it now, but He has a plan. He has placed you where you are for a purpose. And when you commit your work to Him, even the most ordinary job becomes part of something eternal. Instead of seeing work as a burden, see it as an opportunity to honor God. Approach every task with excellence, integrity, and a heart of service, knowing that He is watching, that He is guiding, and that in His perfect time, He will lead you to where He wants you to be. Work is often seen as a daily necessity, something people must do to survive. But beyond making a living, work carries a much deeper significance. It can be an act of worship. Many people compartmentalize their faith and their work, believing that worship only happens in church or through prayer and Bible study. But the truth is, every moment spent working can be an opportunity to honor and glorify God when approached with the right heart. From the very beginning, God created work as part of His divine order. Before sin entered the world, Adam was placed in the Garden of Eden with a responsibility to cultivate and care for it. That means work was not a punishment, but a gift. It was meant to be meaningful and fulfilling, a way for humanity to reflect the creativity, diligence, and faithfulness of God Himself. But when sin entered, work became burdensome, the ground became hard, and labor became toilsome. People began to view work as something to endure rather than something to embrace. Still, God's original design for work did not change. He calls His people to work with excellence, integrity, and diligence, not for human approval, but as an offering to Him. Colossians 3:23 states, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters." This verse reveals a profound truth. Work is not just about meeting deadlines, making money, or gaining recognition. It is about serving God. Every job, no matter how small or ordinary, becomes significant when done for His glory. Jesus Himself demonstrated this in His earthly life. For most of His years before ministry, He worked as a carpenter. The Son of God, who had the power to heal the sick and calm the storm, spent years doing physical labor, shaping wood, building things with His hands. He could have chosen any profession, yet He humbled Himself in a trade that required patience, skill, and dedication. His example shows that no work is beneath a person, and that even the most practical tasks can have spiritual significance when done with the right attitude. The idea of work as worship shifts the focus from self to God. When people see work only as a means of achieving personal success or financial stability, it becomes easy to grow frustrated, unmotivated, or even resentful. But when they approach work as a service to God, everything changes. The workplace becomes a mission field, a place where they can demonstrate the love, character, and grace of Christ. One of the greatest struggles people face is finding meaning in the mundane. Many jobs involve repetitive tasks, long hours, and little recognition. It is easy to wonder if what they are doing truly matters. But when seen through the lens of worship, even the smallest acts take on eternal significance. The Bible reminds believers that God sees everything and He rewards faithfulness. Whether someone is cleaning floors, answering emails, or managing a company, their work is seen by God. He is not measuring success by the world's standards, but by faithfulness and devotion. King David, before becoming ruler over Israel, spent years tending sheep. It was not a glamorous job, but he did it with diligence and a heart that honored God. Those years of humble work prepared him for greater responsibilities. The same principle applies to every believer. God often uses seasons of unseen labor to build character, teach obedience, and shape people for His purposes. The job they hold today may be part of a bigger plan they cannot yet see. Worship is not limited to songs and prayers. It is a way of life. It is found in how people work, how they serve, and how they handle the responsibilities entrusted to them. When work is offered to God as an act of worship, it no longer feels meaningless or exhausting. It becomes an opportunity to reflect His goodness, to serve others with excellence, and to demonstrate faithfulness in all things. Every task, no matter how small, can be transformed into something sacred when done for Him. Feeling lost in life, especially in work, is something many people experience. The daily routine can start to feel repetitive. The tasks may seem insignificant, and the purpose behind it all can become unclear. People begin to ask questions like, why am I doing this? Or, does my work even matter? It's easy to feel directionless, stuck in a job that doesn't seem to lead anywhere or make a difference. But the truth is, God has a purpose for every person's work, even when they cannot see it. Throughout the Bible, there are many examples of individuals who felt lost in their circumstances, but later realized that God was leading them all along. One of the greatest examples is Joseph. As a young man, Joseph had dreams of greatness. Yet his life took a series of unexpected and painful turns. He was betrayed by his brothers, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. From an earthly perspective, it seemed like Joseph's life was falling apart. He was working as a servant in Potiphar's house and later as a prisoner doing tasks that seemed beneath him. He could have easily questioned, why is this happening? Where is God in all of this? But in every situation, Joseph remained faithful. He continued to work with diligence and integrity, even in the lowest positions. What Joseph didn't know at the time was that God was using every one of those experiences to prepare him for something greater. After years of hardship, he was elevated to second in command over Egypt. The same Joseph who once felt forgotten and lost in prison was now in a position to save countless lives during a famine. Looking back, he could see that every step, every seemingly meaningless job, every moment of hardship was part of God's perfect plan. The work that once seemed insignificant had a purpose far beyond what he could have imagined. Many people today feel the same way Joseph must have felt in those difficult years. They feel overlooked in their jobs, stuck in positions where they don't see growth or unfulfilled by the tasks they perform. But just as God was working in Joseph's life, He is working in theirs. Every job, every responsibility, every season of waiting is shaping them, teaching them, and preparing them for what is ahead. The feeling of being lost does not mean that God has abandoned them. It often means that He is leading them through a process of growth. One of the biggest mistakes people make is equating their work with their identity. When their job feels unimportant, when they don't see success, they start to believe they have failed. But a person's worth is not determined by their job title, salary, or achievements. Their worth comes from God. He created every individual with purpose, and that purpose is not dependent on the type of work they do. In Colossians 3:23, the Bible says, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human master." This verse is a reminder that work should not be about personal recognition or worldly success. It should be about serving God. When people shift their perspective and start working for Him instead of for themselves or for others, their jobs take on a new meaning. Even the most ordinary tasks become acts of obedience and worship. Many people believe that if they are not in a high profile or ministry job, their work does not have spiritual significance. But the truth is, God can use people in any profession to make an impact. A teacher can shape the future by influencing young minds. A mechanic can serve others with honesty and excellence. A store clerk can brighten someone's day with kindness. A janitor can take pride in maintaining a clean and welcoming environment. The impact of work is not measured by its visibility, but by the faithfulness with which it is done. There are also times when feeling lost in work is God's way of nudging someone towards something new. Sometimes dissatisfaction is a sign that God is preparing them for a different path. But whether they are meant to stay where they are or step into a new opportunity, the key is to seek God's direction. Proverbs 3:5 and 6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." Instead of becoming discouraged, people should turn to God in prayer, asking for wisdom and guidance. Seasons of feeling lost are not wasted. They are times of preparation, of learning, of growing in faith. Just as Joseph's years of struggle positioned him for greater influence, the work people do today, no matter how small it seems, may be preparing them for something greater than they can imagine. What matters is remaining faithful, trusting that God sees the bigger picture, even when they cannot. Every moment, every job, every task is part of His divine plan. Faithfulness in the small things is one of the most overlooked yet powerful principles in life. Many people dream of doing great things, making a big impact, or stepping into significant roles. But they often struggle to see the value of where they are right now. They may feel stuck in ordinary, repetitive, or seemingly unimportant tasks, wondering if their efforts even matter. However, God has a way of using the small, unseen acts of faithfulness to prepare His people for greater things. Throughout the Bible, God consistently shows that He values faithfulness over status, diligence over recognition, and obedience over ambition. In Luke 16:10, Jesus says, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much." This verse reveals a spiritual principle that applies to every area of life. Before God entrusts someone with more, He watches how they handle what they have now. If they are faithful in small responsibilities, He knows they will be faithful in larger ones. But if they neglect the small things, they are not ready for something greater. A perfect example of this principle is found in the story of David. Before he became king of Israel, David was a simple shepherd boy. He spent his days in the fields caring for sheep, protecting them from wild animals and tending to them with patience and dedication. From the outside, his work seemed insignificant. He was not in a palace, he was not leading armies, and he was not making decisions that affected nations. But in God's eyes, David was being prepared for something much bigger. When the time came for David to face Goliath, he didn't suddenly become courageous or skilled in battle overnight. His confidence came from years of faithfulness in the small things. He had already faced lions and bears while protecting his flock, and those experiences gave him the strength to face a giant. If he had neglected his responsibilities as a shepherd, he might never have been ready for the moment that changed his life. The same principle applies today. Many people are waiting for their big opportunity, thinking that they will be faithful when something important comes along. But God does not work that way. He tests people in the small moments, how they handle their daily tasks, how they treat others, and how they approach responsibilities that no one else sees. A person who slacks off in a small job will not suddenly become diligent when given a bigger role. A person who lacks integrity in minor things will not suddenly develop honesty when faced with greater responsibility. Character is built in the little things, and God watches closely. In everyday life, this principle plays out in countless ways. A student who diligently studies even when no one is watching is preparing for greater opportunities in the future. A worker who takes pride in their job, even if it is not their dream position, is developing a work ethic that will carry them forward. A parent who lovingly cares for their children in the quiet, unseen moments is shaping lives in ways they may never fully realize. The impact of faithfulness in small things often extends far beyond what can be seen in the moment. Jesus himself demonstrated this principle. Before he began his public ministry, he spent years working as a carpenter. He likely built furniture, repaired homes, and performed other tasks that seemed ordinary. But he did them with excellence and integrity, knowing that even the simplest work was valuable in God's eyes. When the time came for him to step into his mission, he was fully prepared because he had already been faithful in the small things. One of the biggest challenges people face is impatience. They want success, recognition, or advancement right away, and when it doesn't come, they grow discouraged. But God's timing is different from human timing. He often uses seasons of small, unnoticed work to refine character, teach patience, and develop perseverance. Joseph spent years in prison before he became a ruler. Moses spent decades in the wilderness before leading the Israelites. Even Jesus waited until the appointed time before beginning his ministry. It is easy to look at others who seem to be advancing faster or achieving more and feel overlooked. But God does not measure success the way the world does. He is more concerned with faithfulness than with immediate results. When a person is consistent, diligent, and trustworthy in small matters, they are laying the foundation for something greater. The key is to focus on what God has placed in front of them today and to do it with excellence, knowing that He sees and honors every effort, no matter how small. The reward for faithfulness is not always immediate, but it is certain. God is always watching, always preparing, and always leading those who trust Him. The small things may seem unimportant now, but in His perfect timing they become stepping stones to something greater. Faithfulness today shapes the future in ways that cannot yet be seen. Every act of diligence, integrity, and obedience matters in God's plan. Work is not just about earning a living, it is an opportunity to serve others. In a world where success is often measured by personal achievements, financial gain, or status, it is easy to overlook the deeper purpose behind work. Many people see their jobs as a means to an end, something they must do to survive or progress in life. But God designed work to be more than that. It is a way to contribute, to bless others, and to reflect His love through service. From the beginning, God created people to work, not only for their own benefit, but also for the good of others. In Genesis 2:15, Adam was placed in the Garden of Eden to care for it. His responsibility was not just about sustaining himself. It was about stewarding something that would provide for creation. This principle continues throughout the Bible. Work is a way to serve, to provide, and to make a difference in the lives of others. One of the greatest examples of work as service is found in the life of Jesus. Though He was the Son of God, He did not come to be served, but to serve. In Mark 10:45, Jesus said, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." His entire life was centered around meeting the needs of others, healing the sick, feeding the hungry, and ultimately sacrificing himself for humanity. If Jesus, the King of Kings, approached his life's work with a servant's heart, then his followers are called to do the same. People often separate their jobs from their faith, thinking that service to others only happens in church or through volunteer work. But the truth is, every job, whether big or small, is an opportunity to serve. A teacher serves by shaping young minds. A doctor serves by caring for the sick. A construction worker serves by building homes and infrastructure. A customer service representative serves by helping others with their needs. No matter what the job is, when it is approached with a mindset of service, it takes on a new level of meaning and purpose. Paul wrote in Galatians 5:13, "Serve one another humbly in love." This command is not limited to church activities. It extends into daily work. When people see their jobs as a way to help others rather than just a personal obligation, their perspective changes. They begin to see opportunities to encourage a coworker, to go the extra mile for a customer, or to complete their work with excellence because they know it will impact someone else. Even in the smallest tasks, there is an opportunity to reflect God's love. One of the greatest obstacles to seeing work as service is the tendency to focus on self-interest. People often approach work with a mindset of what can I gain rather than how can I serve. But the Bible teaches that true fulfillment does not come from what is received, but from what is given. Acts 20:35 says, "It is more blessed to give than to receive." This applies not only to money, but also to time, effort, and work. When people shift their focus from self-centered ambition to service, they find a deeper sense of satisfaction and joy in their work. Joseph's story in the Bible is another powerful example of work as service. Despite being sold into slavery and later imprisoned, he remained faithful in every position he was given. Whether he was managing Potiphar's household, running a prison, or later governing Egypt, his work was always focused on helping others. Because of his faithfulness, he was placed in a position where he could save countless lives during a famine. His work was not just about his own success, it was about serving a greater purpose. Many people struggle with feeling insignificant in their work, believing that what they do does not really matter. But God values work not based on worldly recognition, but on faithfulness and service. Colossians 3:23 reminds believers, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters." This means that no matter what job someone has, they are ultimately serving God when they do it, with excellence and a heart of service. When people begin to see work as a means of service rather than just a duty, everything changes. Instead of frustration, there is fulfillment. Instead of feeling stuck in a meaningless job, they begin to recognize the impact they can have on others. Whether it is a kind word, a job well done, or simply showing up with a positive attitude, their work can become a reflection of God's love. Work is not just about making a living. It is about making a difference. Rest is an essential part of God's design for work, yet in today's fast-pacing world, it is often neglected. Many people associate productivity with constant effort, believing that taking a break is a sign of weakness or laziness. Society glorifies busyness, equating it with success and worth. People push themselves to the limit, working long hours, skipping rest, and ignoring the warning signs of exhaustion. Yet this is not how God intended for work to be. He created rest as a gift, a necessary part of life that allows people to be refreshed, renewed, and restored. From the very beginning, God set the example for rest. After 6 days of creation, He rested on the seventh day. Genesis 2:02 states, "By the seventh day God had finished the work He had been doing, so on the seventh day He rested from all His work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it He rested from all the work of creating that He had done." God did not rest because He was tired. He rested to establish a rhythm for humanity. He set apart one day as holy, a time for people to step away from their labor and find refreshment in Him. Yet, despite this clear example, many struggle to embrace rest. They feel guilty for slowing down, worrying that if they take a break, they will fall behind or miss out on opportunities. Some become so consumed by their work that they neglect their health, their families, and even their relationship with God. They keep pushing forward, ignoring the fact that their bodies, minds, and spirits were not designed to function without rest. Jesus also demonstrated the importance of rest during his ministry. Though he was constantly surrounded by crowds, performing miracles and teaching his disciples, he often withdrew to quiet places to pray and recharge. In Mark 6:31, Jesus told his disciples, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." He recognized that they had been working hard, ministering to others, and that without rest they would be drained. He invited them to step away from their labor and find renewal in his presence. If Jesus, the Son of God, saw the necessity of rest, how much more do people need it today? Ignoring rest leads to burnout. When people overwork themselves, they become physically exhausted, mentally overwhelmed, and emotionally drained. Their productivity declines, their relationships suffer, and their joy in life fades. They begin to resent their work instead of finding purpose in it. God did not create work to be a burden. He designed it to be fulfilling, but that fulfillment is only possible when balanced with rest. Rest is not just about sleeping or taking a vacation. It is about finding restoration in God. True rest is not simply ceasing from activity. It is about reconnecting with the one who gives strength. In Matthew 11:28, Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." This is an invitation, not just to stop working, but to find deep soul-level renewal in him. Many people take breaks but never truly rest because they are still carrying the weight of their worries, anxieties, and responsibilities. But when they come to God, they can lay those burdens down and experience real peace. The Sabbath was given as a commandment, not as a suggestion. In Exodus 28, verse 8 to 10, God instructed his people to observe a day of rest, setting it apart as holy. This was not meant to be restrictive, but rather a blessing, a time to step away from labor and focus on God. Yet many today ignore this principle, treating rest as optional rather than necessary. They fill their schedules with endless tasks, leaving no room for stillness, reflection, or spiritual renewal. Rest also allows people to gain perspective. When caught up in the demands of work, it is easy to lose sight of what truly matters. People become consumed with deadlines, financial pressures, and career ambitions, forgetting that life is about more than just achieving goals. Taking time to rest allows them to step back, refocus on what is important, and realign their priorities with God's will. When people embrace rest as part of God's design, they experience greater peace, clarity, and strength. Their work becomes more effective because they are not operating from a place of exhaustion, but from a place of renewal. They are able to serve others with joy rather than with resentment. They find balance in their lives, honoring God not just through their labor, but also through their willingness to trust Him enough to rest. God's plan for work includes rest because He knows that people cannot function without it. He calls them not to endless striving, but to a rhythm of work and rest that brings life, joy, and purpose. When people trust Him enough to step away from their labor and find rest in Him, they discover that He is the true source of strength, provision, and fulfillment.